Well, the overriding question yesterday on the podcast was, can you swear on this podcast? And that seemed to be the question that drove the discussion with Amanda Galbraith. If you missed it, it's worth listening to, because we got into a rather unvarnished conversation about the state of the campaign, and particularly about the Liberals not being able to kind of get out of their own way in some ways. They have what sounds like really solid announcements, and then I think the John Wright, I think the phrase that Amanda used, they were stomping on their own message, and that happened yesterday with the minister using the phrase brothers to describe the Taliban. We can look in that in the rearview mirror or not, and say it's justified, but whether you say it was okay for her to use that phrase, to Amanda's point at least, they stomped on their own message. And we got to a point then where there was more media, 15, 18 hours later, still talking about that particular issue. And we're starting to see it pop up in commentary still, in headlines, in polling. Is it a question? Today, who knew? Afghanistan back and bites the Prime Minister in the rear end with what we have seen in terms of what's gone on today at the airport.
And I think this is the ballot question going forward. I mean, at least for the next couple of weeks. One of the most heartbreaking things to witness on Twitter this afternoon was not the unvarnished carnage which many people are watching of where the bomb went off in that sewage canal, but one photograph out the back of one of our planes with the airport in the background, and it basically says, leaving 700 behind. Two things struck me, Dave, when I looked at the graphic canal scene where the bombs had gone off and the ISIS had opened up on that crowd. There were people in red outfits trying to climb out of the canal, and there were people with red outfits on the side, and having heard at least that people who were supposed to identify themselves to Canadian soldiers were to wear red and to call out Canada. So it may well be that those people were people that we were supposed to get or told to go there, that were in the midst of where the bomb went off. That was the first thing. The second thing was to suddenly know now that we have left 700 people behind. That's what was said, who were there, who should have been processed, and who missed our flight out. But to also hear that the United Kingdom and the United States had literally taken over 10,000 each, between 11,000 and 17,000 people out of that area. And we, for all of our trumpeting, have taken out 2,100 people. I think this is the dynamic to which the Prime Minister now walks smack into. There's no way out of this, where they're basically going to say, you called this election, there were calls for intervention 3 months ago. And then we heard about people who were trying desperately to upload forms to a site at Global Affairs that crashed, or at Immigration Canada. And it's this whole notion of, people's lives are at stake and we're pencil pushing our way through this. But it emphasizes something that the opposition parties are now going to say, and that is, you say one thing and you do another. You say we're back when in fact we're out. You say we're going to rescue 20,000. You bring back a tenth of that. You say that our armed forces are going in and we're going to make sure people are out, and there's no way out. And I think that this is going to be the most significant thing that affects this campaign.
I would hazard to say that we're in a situation where you use the phrase, you say you do one thing and you're only going to do this. The answer, I think, we'll look for them to say you do nothing, because the point has been made several times before the election was even called on the interpreters issue. They knew as soon as Biden got elected that this was on the agenda. They knew that they were going to be pulling out, so that there wasn't a plan already to say, here's how we're going to move these people out and do so effectively and efficiently while we still have control of the country, never mind the airport. That's the problem there. So they abandon it relatively early. I hear people saying, well, yeah, it's just as bad in France and it's just as bad. It doesn't matter. I don't think you can play this moral relativism game, particularly in the middle of a campaign. You and I started this conversation day one, making the point that unlike, I think, any other government that called an election, they're being called upon to lead and to govern in a more intense circumstance than any other time in our history during a campaign. Now, it might have happened during the Second World War, but I don't have that memory. So we got to go back a long way into something fairly significant where we're calling on the government of the day in an election campaign to lead and to govern, to create new policy, all of those things. And I don't care what political stripe you are. That's failure.
Well, and looking at it from a strictly campaign perspective, as the leader of the Liberal Party, the prime minister of the country, trying to get through an election campaign and win either now a minority or a majority, you are going to be thrown off for the next 5 or 6 days. Like, we're not talking an overnight thing and it goes away. What the United States does, the more footage that comes available, the more people that now speak up from the side saying, we've got people back there, we have to go and do... Like, this is now, we're into a complete circumstance where there's going to be calls for Parliament to be returned to, like the United Kingdom did, for debates to take place. You're finished. I mean, for the next 5 days or so, you can't basically wake up on Saturday morning because, and just make an announcement on, housing policy. So this is going to follow him. And the other thing, too, is in the mainstream media, you and I know the news cycle. It usually takes from now until maybe tomorrow at noon on a regular story to kind of go through its cycle. Polls are part of that. No. We're Thursday heading into Friday, which heads into the weekend, which means main sections, which means looking at international footage and comparing us to the Americans and the French and everybody else who have done this sort of thing. So, no, this is far more drastic a circumstance. Secondly, I think what it does is it suddenly draws in a whole bunch of other characters who you would not expect. We're going to have academics. We're going to have people who are experts in foreign policy. I mean, it's all going to be aimed there. And then the other dynamic is we have the leader of the Conservative Party who's a former RCAF, who knows this stuff inside and out, who's been relatively good on the campaign trail. Now, it hasn't really increased the numbers per se for the party, but has held so far. Is this his moment? Is this his moment not to say, I could have done better, but to say, under my watch, we would have started this because I know what it's like on the ground in those circumstances. Like it's a contrast.
It's interesting that you bring that up because earlier today there was a piece that was published by the folks at the Angus Reid Institute, and they were talking about, sort of capturing the head and the heart of Canadian voters. And their tendencies appear to show that, voter tendencies right now appear to show, based on the Angus Reid research, that more heads and hearts are comfortable with O'Toole. More comfortable than the prime minister in some cases. So does this kind of thing, to your point, actually accelerate some of that? And that's going to be a key part. We talked about that sort of momentum in the psyche of the voters that will drive them to make decisions. I'm thinking the head and the heart thing, if you capture both of them and this becomes the issue, and we're talking about a vet who is leading one of the parties, doesn't matter which, I would think that you're right. This is the moment.
You're right, but tone is going to mean everything. And this is a moment where I think where Erin O'Toole has to be very reflective. There's a great moment when Bobby Kennedy is standing on the back of a truck supposed to be making a speech to a group of people, and in fact delivers the fact that Martin Luther King has been shot. And it's an incredible moment because he talks to the instant elements of it, and people, groan, but he says some things that are really important. But it's the next day when here he is as the former Attorney General, having a brother who's been killed, says effectively to a group of people, I was going to say this at lunch today, but I'm not. I'm going to talk about violence in America. And if you listen to what he said then to what the United States is like today, you would basically say that was in 1968. It could have been said yesterday. But he talks about from the bullet to the ballot. And he does it in such a way in which it stops everything. And he basically says, why? Why does this go on over and over again? It's a moment. And I think if I were advising Erin O'Toole, this is not a day for politics. This is a day for reflection on who we are as people. And I think if Erin O'Toole is going to have the right impact, it's effectively to stand back from it all and say, we're better than this. When the world calls upon us, we don't sit back and pencil push. We actually step up and we go and do something to help people. And we've left people behind. And, I as a leader don't want my country to be like that. I think it's that kind of a thing where he doesn't necessarily attack Trudeau, because Trudeau's going to get attacked all over the place. But this is his potential moment to have a sense of not futility, but a sense of judgment and looking forward to say, this is how we should act. I think it's a real moment for him because he has the credentials to do it. And I think you're right. People are willing to, again, a lot of people don't know who Erin O'Toole is. They're just learning about who he is. And over the last short while, this is yet one more brick in that wall that he could put into it to form the foundation of his house.
Mm-hmm. Well, needless to say, the events in Kabul today, I'm just watching it kind of unfold here as we're talking. And 2 explosions. One was a suicide bombing. One happened where the British troops had been stationed. So this story is going to unfold, as you say, over the coming days. It will certainly catch fire with breathless reporting, and suitably so, out of the United States. My guess is, John, that you and I will still be talking about some form of it in the aftermath come Monday, at least, because you're right. This is going to hit a crescendo probably sometime Sunday, where normally they would take a day off on the campaign, right? They take a day off come the weekend. I'm not sure that they have the luxury of doing that. They're not going to be able to spend much downtime. They have to deal with this in a decisive manner. But I don't know how you do that now that this has happened. I don't. And I think the difference is that you have to act like a prime minister as opposed to a candidate. Right.
And he, I know, and how he's going to deal with this. Like, it's not like the COVID stuff where he came out every day and talked to people in that breathless kind of way. I mean, we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who had, Canadian forms filled out yelling from a sewage canal, I want to go, and lifting their kids up to do it. And this is what, is going to be for them. So how do you, again, I don't think you can basically say, well, we did our best and we're all home now and thank God we weren't there when the bomb went off. I think you have to say, we're going to do something about this, but I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's only going to evolve based on what the United States is going to do and the United Kingdom. So he's going to get roasted for the next 48 hours. And we'll see what comes out of that and how it goes. But this campaign effectively, if you thought you were going to have a plank a day on different public policy, you ain't getting back to that anytime soon. It'll probably be next Wednesday or Thursday if anything, starts to form or gel. But this momentum could turn very quickly to the other parties.
Well, what's interesting, you have said this, I think, almost every day we've been on, where we talk about things that are out of the control of the Liberal Party. Now it's not just the event that's out of the control of the Liberal Party or the candidates. It's what other countries do about this and how they manage that crisis is out of their control as well. So whether there's a there or not, of course, we'll keep an ear on and an eye on all of that. So let's leave it there. Tomorrow we'll get into our regular discussion with Keith Leslie. We'll be talking more about the effects of provincial politics on this campaign. I don't even know. I mean, Doug Ford's already telling his team, stay out of it, but we'll see how that might be playing in other quarters across the country. John Wright is the Senior Vice President with Maru Opinion. I'm Dave Trafford. This is The Rit Race. It is an Eye Contact podcast.